This happened to a man traveling through Tokyo Airport. When he presented his passport, the authorities were baffled. The passport was genuine. The only problem was the country that issued it didn't exist.
How could a man arrive at an airport with a passport from a country that doesn't exist? That's what happened at Tokyo's Haneda Airport in 1954 when a tourist showed a passport from Taured, a place no one had ever heard of.
In 1954, a businessman arrived in Japan on an inbound flight from a country called Taured. It was a place that simply did not exist.
What at first looked like an impossible mistake quickly turned into a puzzle that no one could solve. Do not leave yet, because the truth about this strange case is even stranger and scarier than you thought. The arrival in Tokyo. In July 1954, it was a hot summer day, and Tokyo's Haneda Airport was full of people going about their work, traveling, and vacationing. Everyone who saw it thought it was just another day at one of the biggest airports in the world. However, as one tourist got off the plane, the normal and the unusual were about to meet in a way that no one could have imagined. A man in a dark suit walked confidently through the crowd. He spoke French and Japanese very well, which made him seem worldly and traveled, just like many other foreign business people going through the airport. At first glance, he looked just like everyone else, until he gave his passport to be checked. The passport was taken without much thought by the customs officers. That's when things went from strange to very strange, very quickly. To their surprise, the passport named Taured as a country no one had ever heard of. The document said the country was between France and Spain, so it seemed like even the most experienced officers had missed it. The customs officers were frozen for a moment. They started to look through the passport pages, looking for hints in the stamps and visas, but they were left even more confused. The visas seemed real. The stamps looked like those used by other countries. There was nothing about the passport that made me think forgery at first sight. In fact, it almost seemed too real to be a mistake. But the man himself was calm, almost confused by all the chaos. He told them right away that Taured was a country that had been around for more than 1,000 years. He even seemed a little insulted that the police officers didn't know much about his country, as if their lack of knowledge was a hassle rather than a red flag. The officials became more worried as they tried to figure out what was going on. They looked at all the maps they had, but none of them showed that Taured was there. A man showed them a spot on the map between France and Spain when they asked him where his country was. He could have pointed to Andorra, the small principality in the middle of the two, but he claimed that his country had been there for hundreds of years. There was more going on than just a misunderstanding. The man seemed too sure of his facts and truth. The government workers were still having a hard time making sense of everything. Could this just be a mistake made by a clerk? They might not have kept track of a new country that had formed. But everything the man said seemed to go against what they knew about the world. At this point, the story got even stranger. The man wasn't upset, was polite, and kept his cool. His driver's license, business papers, and even a checkbook were all in a business bag with him. All of these proved that he was from Taured. These things all had the same Taured symbol on them, which the officials also didn't know what it meant. The man gave them his papers with such confidence that it seemed like he was trying to show them how wrong they were instead of trying to prove his own story. The situation got stranger as the customs officers looked into it more. Everything about him was real. His passport, his business dealings, his company ties, and even his money. But no one could explain how. His ties to several European countries were confirmed. It was easy for him to talk about his business in Japan, but when the officials called his claimed business, they had never heard of him. It became clearer as they dug deeper that something very wrong was going on. The Taured company he said he worked for wasn't listed anywhere. There was no sign of his alleged embassy. Nothing could be proven. This man seemed to have come from a world where there were no rules, where a country that wasn't on any map had somehow gotten through. It wasn't just a case of misunderstanding. This wasn't a normal mistake on the passport. Even though the papers were real, the country was not. There was a man from a place that shouldn't exist standing right in front of them, acting like nothing was strange. What was going on then? The customs officials put the man in brief detention because they couldn't believe how big a problem they were facing. He was taken to a nearby hotel by police while the probe went on. The truth of the situation started to come out, but no one knew what to do yet. The stranger part? This was just the start, because the next thing that happened turned this story into something much darker than anyone had thought. What happened next is far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. His disappearance wasn't just strange, it was impossible. Keep watching, because the next chapter of this eerie mystery is about to unfold. The disappearance. Because of the mess with the passport and Taured's strange story, the police thought it would be best to hold the man overnight. Because there were so many questions they wanted to ask, they moved him to a hotel near the airport. The next day, he would be questioned more and be watched. The man was calm for now, almost to the point of being strangely at peace. He didn't look scared, just confused. He thought that everything would work out in the morning, but he had no idea that things would not go as planned. There was tight security around him. His hotel room was locked, and there were several guards standing outside his door. There were no windows to use as escape routes, and the door had been locked, checked, and checked again. They made sure that this man, who had been so good at getting away from them, wouldn't get away without being seen. It looked like they were in charge, but that night, the man's strange calmness would soon change into something much scarier. Even though there was a lot of security, the man seemed pretty calm. He got comfortable in bed without making a sound. Not a bit of fear or worry could be seen on his face. He seemed to be aware that everything would be resolved soon, and things would return to how they should be. They were keeping an eye on him, but there was something unsettling about his calmness that made them nervous. They weren't sure what it was, but they had the feeling that they were missing something. It was morning. The guards went around and knocked on the door, getting ready to ask the man more. But when they opened the door, they saw something that they hadn't seen before. There was no one in the room at all. Once the bed was made, it wasn't touched again. The sheets weren't even rolled up. There were no signs of a fight, and the man did not seem to have run away or broken out. His luggage, briefcase, and papers are all gone, along with other personal things. It was like everything he had was gone. He hadn't been there at all, it seemed. As the police searched the hotel from top to bottom, panic spread among them. There was no sign of him anywhere. Not a single hint. The guards, who had been on duty all night, had not heard anything. No movements or sounds of a fight could be heard. Nothing could explain what went on. The man was no longer seen or heard from. The lock on his passport had been broken, and now it was gone, like it had just disappeared. There were searches all over the hotel, in every hallway and at every exit. There were no signs of the man anywhere. The security cams didn't give any answers. All they showed was normal hotel activity. The man had not been seen leaving. No one had seen him enter or leave the entrance, and there were no signs that he had gone by the guards who were watching over the hotel. He seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Now, the police were dealing with something much worse than a simple visa mix-up or even a skilled con artist. It was impossible, but it happened. How could a man who was being closely watched leave a locked room with no signs of getting out? There's no sign of that person anywhere. Worse still, what happened to his papers? They were the only thing that connected him to this strange world of Taured. They were all gone, like they had never been. It wasn't just another lost tourist or a normal crime case. this was not like that. It felt like the air was getting thicker, like reality was shifting, and nothing made sense. The man's escape was not only strange, it was also impossible. There were more questions than answers for the police, and each one was scarier than the last. What had the man from Taured really done? Was this the work of a very skilled fake ring, or was there something else going on? Something darker and harder to explain. They tried to figure it out, but couldn't. The more they tried, the less it made sense. The case, which began as a strange event, now seemed like a nightmare. The man was no longer there, and neither were the solutions. The police had lost more than just a man. They had lost a piece of reality that they couldn't figure out. As the news spread, people all over the world asked the scariest question. What if he wasn't even a man? How did the man from Taured end up? Was he going missing because of a dark secret? Or was he a part of something much bigger than we thought? It's possible that the answer will scare you more than you think. The man from Taured becomes a mystery. The story didn't go away after the man mysteriously disappeared. Instead, it turned into a story that quickly spread through rumors, books, and finally, the internet. After seeing what they did, people were shocked and tried to make sense of it. People told stories about the man from Taured, and the mystery didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to get bigger with each new story. It seemed like everyone who heard the story had their own idea about what happened, and each one was stranger than the last. For years, rumors were all over the place. There were a lot of crazy theories going around, and each one was worse than the last. Many people thought the man was from the future, but had accidentally stepped into the present. Some people thought the man was from a different universe, where Taured was a real country, and everything else was the same. He had accidentally crossed over into our universe, though. A different common explanation was that the man was involved in a secret government project that went wrong, and the officials were trying to hide the truth. That was not the end of the ideas. Some people linked the man's story to something called the Mandela effect, which is a growing trend in which big groups of people remember things that didn't happen or remember events differently. Some people thought that the man from Taured was proof of parallel timelines, which means that more than one version of reality could exist at the same time, and sometimes those versions would mix. There was a chance that the man was from one of those other worlds and didn't fit in ours. It grew into something bigger as more people became interested in it. There were more and more books, articles, and films about the man from Taured. On online forums, people argued about what his story meant and came up with ideas so fast that no one could keep up. The secret of the man became a symbol of what no one knows, the most mysterious thing that can't be explained. The idea that the man was a mistake in our reality, a flaw in the system, or a part of the world that didn't fit, gave rise to the glitch in the matrix meme. Every time the story was told, it got deeper and more interesting. A tale was born. The story seemed based on some kind of truth at first, just a strange event that wasn't easy to explain. But as the crazy ideas got wilder, the mystery itself became less clear. Soon, everyone had a different story about what had happened, and none of them seemed to fit with what really happened. Some said the guy had just vanished into thin air, while others said he had been gone in a flash of light, like in a science fiction movie. But as the years went by, most people came to think it was all a hoax, a piece of myth meant to be funny. It wasn't like there was any proof, and the police had never really looked into it and found any answers. Some people thought it was just a misunderstanding or a mistaken identity. They thought it was because a tourist had lied about his situation and then disappeared in the confusion. As time went on, the story of the man from Taured was pushed to the background and forgotten. Still, Just when it looked like the story would end up being a strange blip in history, something unexpected happened. New facts came to light. The story didn't stay hidden. Files started to get out. Information from people who were once part of the investigation became public, and it painted a much darker picture. The truth seemed scarier as more and more of these new pieces of information were put together. What at first looked like a complicated urban tale turned out to be something much scarier. Now there was no doubt. The man from Taured wasn't just a puzzle for people who believe in conspiracies. There was more to it than that. If all the ideas about time travel and parallel worlds weren't so far off, what would be the point? What if, after all this time, the story was hiding more truth than anyone had dared to think? It got easier to put together the puzzle as more people looked into the past. Suddenly, the thought of a parallel world didn't seem so crazy. What if the man really did come from another world? Why would the government try to hide something much more dangerous than a simple immigration problem? What if there was a secret truth that had been kept from people for years and was now ready to be found? It wasn't clear what the man from Taured was up to. In fact, things were just beginning. Everyone had to rethink everything they thought they knew because new papers, evidence, and theories were coming out. It wasn't just another ghost story or a computer glitch. It was much more complicated and very scary. The truth behind the myth. The story of the man from Taured was mostly thought of as an urban tale for many years. Everything about it, the strange passport, the strange story, and the impossible disappearance seemed like a big problem that could not be solved.
In July of 1954, a man landed at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. He spoke multiple languages, he carried valid documents, he had stamps from real countries, and one that didn't exist.
Just when it looked like the truth would never come out, something new happened that changed everything. In recent years, DNA testing has changed forensic science. Now, it was about to do something that no one thought was possible. It would shed light on a case that had been baffling for more than 50 years. Modern forensic methods, such as DNA testing and genealogical study, helped find out who the man from Taured really was. It was found that what was once thought to be an impossible case of a traveler from another world had a much more human cause. There were no parallel universes or time travel involved. Instead, it was about a man who had been working in secret for years, crossing foreign borders with fake identities. After a lot of work, forensic experts were able to find a genetic link. They looked into the case for years and finally found a shocking link that led them to a man named John Zegras. During the Cold War, Zegras worked as an intelligence agent and went by the name Taured for his secret work. All of this was part of a big plan to hide who they were and do things that most people would never find out about. John Zegras did not go back in time. He wasn't a lost soul from a different world. He had a very real plan. He had made up a name and fake papers on purpose so he could hide in plain sight. That Taured's passport wasn't some lost artifact from another world. It was a carefully planned lie meant to hide his real goal. DNA tests helped them find this link and prove that the man from Taured was, in fact, John Zegras. For years, no one had heard of this man. But why did he pick Taured? Why make up a country that doesn't exist? Zegras's part in the Cold War is the key to the answer. He and other intelligence agents often had to use fake names to move around in other countries without being caught. Making a fake country was a smart way to avoid being caught by international agencies without drawing attention to himself. By going by the name Taured, Zegras could do what he wanted without anyone asking where he came from. It wasn't a name that was on any government map, which made it harder for people to follow his path. It wasn't just the Ayid that was fake. Zegras made a huge network of fake papers to help him hide his identity. Everything, from business papers to bank accounts, and even a driver's license, was part of a complex plan to stay hidden. He didn't want to be caught, and he was smart enough to always be one step ahead of the police. In the past, the passport problem was only a small part of a much bigger puzzle that was never meant to be solved. Zagreus wasn't just hiding in plain sight. He was also playing a risky game by crossing countries without getting caught, which would have revealed who he really was. So why did he just vanish? That question doesn't have a clear answer. There was a chance that Zagreus's work had become dangerous. It's possible that he got too close to something, or maybe he was just trying to get away from a world that had become too dangerous for him after years of using fake names. John Zagreus, the man from Taured who went missing, wasn't just one man who went missing. Because of this, international security methods are still not completely safe. If one man could make a whole fake identity and cross countries without getting caught, what about other people? What about the silent players who move around the world without being seen and use fake names to control events behind the scenes? What other false identities are floating around out there that no one sees? If a man could leave without a trace, how many others are there? The search for the man from Taured didn't just lead to the identification of a single mystery traveler. It brought up a bigger problem that most of us don't think about when we go through airports or give our papers to someone else. What does all of this tell us about how to keep the world safe? It's possible that the world we live in can be manipulated faster than we thought. John Zagreus, was he just a person, or was he the start of something much worse? The search for his identity brought up more questions than it solved, and the results had big effects. But what if this wasn't just an agent going bad? Maybe the story of John Zagreus and the man from Taured has more to it than we thought? It will get even more into the hidden truths of this case in the next chapter, showing something much scarier than what we've seen so far. The chilling implications. The unsettling truth about John Zagreus became clear as the puzzle of the man from Taured was solved. He was more than just a traveler with a strange passport. He wasn't a strange person from a country that didn't exist. He was very good at lying. He could make up whole fake identities and use them to sneak across foreign borders without being caught.
So he's called the man from Taured because on his passport it said that the country he came from was called Taured. He spoke fluent French, but he also spoke fluent Japanese.
Zagreus wasn't just pretending to be someone else to get through customs. He was also changing reality in a way that even the most experienced officials didn't understand. Zagreus didn't just make up a country. A whole life and past were made up by him. Each of his documents, his passport, business papers, driver's license, and even his bank records was carefully made to look as real as possible. It looked like every stamp, visa, and official signature was in the right place, and none of them raised any red flags. In a way, he was making up his own version of reality. Not only did the papers fool airport officials, but they also fooled people who are very good at finding fraud. Not just the fact that he had fake papers is what makes this so scary. It's because he made these papers look like they were real. Zagreus thought Taured's ID wasn't a lie. It was the truth. The man wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was acting like the fake character he had made up was his real self. He made up a whole world around himself, complete with a country, a government, a business, and even a banking system that didn't exist. He did all of this without leaving any signs. This kind of lying isn't just meant to trick people. There are tricks being played on the systems we depend on to keep us safe. Systems like borders, visa checks, and security checks are meant to make sure that we are who we say we are, where we're from, and that we are allowed to be in a certain place. We saw how weak these methods are with Zagreus.
The officers confronted the man about the seemingly fictional country. The stranger grew agitated and kept insisting that Taured was a real place. He was born there after all.
The fact that he was able to break international checks and balances showed us how quickly our identity systems can be broken. What scared me most about Zegris's actions wasn't just how well he tricked the authorities, it was how quickly the systems we depend on could be broken. It's scary to think about how many fake names could be going around without being found. Zegris got away with this, but how many other people have done the same thing and gotten away with it? How many fake identities are out there, moving easily through countries, crossing borders, and going into private areas without anyone noticing they're not who they say they are? Zegris wasn't just a thief by himself or a lost traveler. His acts showed the huge holes in the country's security. It's one thing to make up a story, but it's quite another to make up a whole history and identity and then ignore the systems that are meant to keep us safe. What does that say about the holes in the way we protect ourselves around the world? A single person's story can fool us. How many more, who might be much more dangerous, are out there doing the same thing? Even scarier is the fact that Zegris not only faked his name, but he also made it look just right. He didn't just lie on some forms, he carefully planned a whole world to support his survival. His made-up country of Taured was more than just a name. It was a whole lie. The way his business papers were set up made it look like he was a real foreign businessman. His banking information was carefully made to look like it was a normal part of the world's financial system. The lie wasn't just a smart trick. It was a web of lies meant to make the identity seem real so that no one could question it. Lots of things are affected by this. How many times have fake names been found? How many times have fake papers gotten past those in charge of immigration? Zegris was very good at tricking people, but what if there are other people working in the shadows who are just as good and making up different names to trick people? How many hidden networks are out there, using fake names to get into private areas? And how many people don't know about the dangers? The real fear isn't about parallel universes or going back in time. It's about understanding how easy it is to change the way things are in our world. When you think about how well Zegris was able to fake an identity, you start to wonder how much of what we think is true is actually made up, and how much of our world could be changed if someone had the right tools and knowledge. What else could be faked if someone had enough time, skill, and tools? Could the very idea of truth be made up so that it's hard to know what's real and what's not? What if this is just the start of a bigger trend? What if it gets easier and easier to make up new worlds, change the truth, and trick people into believing things that don't exist as technology gets better? How about if the line between real and fake gets so thin that we can't tell them apart? It's possible that in the future, many more people like John Zegris will be slipping through the cracks with fake names, and no one will notice. If you found this mystery as chilling as we did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Click on the next video popping up on your screen to dive deeper into the unknown.